Thanks, Isabella. So welcome everyone today. Welcome to our lunchtime learning sessions. Over the past few months and the next few weeks, we've been covering topics and skills around adaptation. Today, we'll be hearing from our expert speakers, sharing their knowledge with us and giving a Forth Valley setting for some of the solutions that we will cover. Please do keep an eye on our Eventbrite page and sign up to our free membership if you can, and that will keep you best up to date with our next events and next themes coming up. I'm Steffi Stapleton Barnes. I'm working with the Forth Valley Climate Action Hub within FEL Scotland, and we're also joined with Isabella today from FEL Scotland. So we're both on hand if you need anything. And again, we can read out questions in the chat if you prefer. These lunchtime learning sessions feed into our larger piece of work as Forth Valley's Climate Action Hub, raising awareness of climate actions that can be realised in our area and amplifying some of the fantastic work that's already being achieved. Today we're going to hear from Sue from the Countryside Trust, Frank and Leigh from On the Verge. We're going to listen to their presentations first, and once we hear from both speakers, there's going to be some time for some questions and answers, a bit of discussion. So if you do have something that pops into your head before that point, please feel free to pop it in the chat, and we can keep a note of it and read it back to our speakers at the end. So without further ado, if you're happy to start us off, Sue, we'll get started.
Hello, everybody. Right, hopefully the technology will work, and we've just tested it. So, has that come through? Can everyone see that?
Yeah, that's looking good.
Fabulous. Okay, I shall start. So, my name's Sue Morris. I'm the Trust Director for Loch, Lomond and the Trossachs Countryside Trust. So, we're the official charity, I guess, of the national park. I am not an ecologist. I'm not a biologist. I'm a generalist, but I've been working in various roles within the national park over the last 15 years, mostly relating to nature restoration and getting people out and about into the outdoors. So over those years, I've learned a lot, and I've also met a lot of experts, and I know who to help if I need help. But I think that's the key thing I've learned, is that you don't need to be an expert. You just need to have an interest, and you need to have a skill, pick a lane, work in it, and deliver. So I think that's my sort of key learning so far. And I think I'm just going to take you through some of the work that we are currently doing within the national park in relation to biodiversity. I could honestly talk for hours about this, so I'm more than happy to sort of take questions and talk about some more in more detail at another time. But I think it's worth just sort of reiterating scale, which is why I've called this Landscapes to Individuals, because it doesn't matter what scale you're at, but we're working at lots of different scales, and those scales have different impact. So I'm just going to run you through what we're doing at the different scales. But first of all, we sort of need to talk about all the bad bit, really, which is why we have to talk about biodiversity. We are in a crisis. There is the twin crisis of the carbon emergency, but also biodiversity loss. Carbon emergency gets a lot more interest and has a lot more traction within the wider society. Biodiversity loss is more complicated to discuss on a media headline. There's lots of drivers to biodiversity loss. I'm guessing as you've all joined this meeting, you understand what biodiversity is. It is life's rich tapestry. It is the skin of the earth that is living, basically, and it's how that skin is working together in balance, basically. So these are just some of the things that are drivers for why we are in a biodiversity crisis at the moment. All of them are unfortunately, because of us humans and our footprint on the planet. We are out of balance, basically, with the wider world and nature, whatever you want to call it. Wildlife outside the great outdoors. So I'll talk through some of these through the slides, but essentially they fall into our impact in terms of we are building, constructing, producing, mining, and all of that relates to habitat loss, habitat fragmentation. it is creating an imbalance in our ecosystems, which is then causing some species to be at stress, some species to be lost. We are less engaged and less part of that wider world as a race, and that knowledge is meaning that we value certain things more, or we don't value certain things more. We notice certain things more. We don't notice certain things more. All of those things are having a combined impact, along with the prevalence of us being an international race now. Invasives and diseases are key things that are merging in, partly through movement of items, ourselves, our feet, and habitats don't have the resilience to defend themselves. Basically, we're adding chemicals, we're taking up space, and just our own feet and our own life, our boxes that we live in, are all having an impact. And obviously there's the carbon element to it. The climate has changed. So that does all sound really doom and gloom, but I think it's important to sort of look at all the different elements that are causing biodiversity loss. And I've stolen this next slide from Nature Scott, so I really thank Nature Scott for letting me use this, although I haven't told them. I saw this in a presentation relating to agriculture, and although it's a very complicated slide, essentially what it's showing on the top left-hand slide is the average temperature has increased. The bottom slide shows that the farmland bird population has not increased with it; it is declining. But the slide on the right-hand slide shows that it's the way that the climate is changing is going to be different. So this is what is predicted to happen in Scotland. The left-hand side, there's going to be increased precipitation, especially in winter. On the right to the east is going to be summer drought. And in the middle, there's more likely to be intense storms and intense rainfall. We've just had it in Storm Owen. So actually the adaptation that's needed is going to be different for all of those different areas. So it's not one size fits all. And I think it's just really important to remember that local geography is important. So I'm just going to talk through landscapes, communities, and then people in terms of how we're working to try and address the biodiversity crisis. So this is obviously, for those of you that are not as familiar with the national park, this is a geography of the national park. We are currently working with various different partners on 3 different landscapes. I'm going to talk about 2 of those landscapes today. Working at that scale means the impact you have is amplified, basically. So this middle brown square blob thing is called the Great Trossachs Forest. The one at the top, the green one, is called Wild Strathfillan, and the one to the left, the north-south one, is a newly establishing landscape called Loch Lomond Rainforest. I'm not actually going to talk very much about Loch Lomond Rainforest, other than to say that Scotland has a rainforest. It's a temperate rainforest. It's basically, if you see stuff growing on trees, growing, and then stuff growing on that stuff, that is come about because of the wet, damp, mild climate that the west of Scotland has. There are not many temperate rainforests left in the world, and Scotland has really got quite a lot of important mosses, important lichens, important bryophytes. So there is a massive body of work that's just starting across the whole of west of Scotland through this thing called the Alliance of Scotland's Rainforests, to look at how we all collectively can protect that really important habitat. We've never really identified it as a rainforest, but it is a really emerging and exciting area of conservation work. So I'll just flag that for a future interest if any of you are interested in it. So first of all, Great Trossachs Forest. This is a heartwarming bit to start with in terms of what can happen when people think big, act big, commit in the long term. So to the east, for a geography point of view, is Callander. To the west is Loch Lomond at Inversnaid. So there's 3 land holdings that basically make up the Great Trossachs Forest. It's Woodland Trust Scotland, it's Forest and Land Scotland, and RSPB Scotland. There's lots of Scotlands in that. So these 3 organisations had the same idea and the same vision, and they decided to work together, and they've committed to work together for 200 years. We're in year 20, almost, of that. And their big vision was, let's create a connective native woodland. Let's connect up the fragmented habitats. So going back to that biodiversity loss, let's look at the herbivore pressure. Let's look at the invasives. Let's work together to collectively manage all of the issues and address all of those issues to create one huge native woodland that enables wildlife to move through it, to adapt, and to have the space that is needed to go into the next 200 years, basically. So this is what the connected habitat will and is looking like. So there's been a whole raft of tree planting that's happened over the last 15 years. And the dark green areas are where we currently have trees. The lighter green areas are where the sort of next phase of that is. So we are involved, Countryside Trust is involved in that we are leading the delivery on behalf of the partners for some elements of that phase 4 we're now in. The trees are now growing and everything we're starting to get some species come back. So there's a specific butterfly called the pearl border fritillary, which was lost to the Trossachs. It's now the Great Trossachs Forest is now a stronghold for that butterfly. It's a very particular butterfly. It likes southern slopes and it likes sunshine and it likes certain types of grazing pressure, but we've managed to get that right. So there are some stories coming through our monitoring of how a big vision and a big impact really works, which is a really nice thing to start with. But obviously that's land managers who have huge areas of land willing to commit on a huge land a time frame. We don't all have that opportunity. So the one that we're now working on, just to remind you, is this one at the top, which is wild Strathyllum. This is a completely different model of working together, basically. This is lots of smaller land holdings. We don't have a big RSPB site or a woodland trust site within the boundary. There are lots of smaller land managers, smaller farms, more sporting estates, hill farming, all privately owned, mostly people who live and work on the land. It is their source of income. So we are working, we're lead funding partner at the moment for, again, a long-term vision, but we're working from the bottom up. So we've not said, this is where we're going to be in 200 years. We're saying, what are you guys up for now? What can we deliver now? So we're focusing on what is available to restore at this stage. And so it's a proper grassroots upwards. We're working at the pace of the land managers, and we're working with the land managers to say, well, where do you have the opportunity to make a little bit of space for nature? And we are also working with the communities within that geography. So that's Strathyllum mostly, but also Killin Development Trust. Strathyllum own lands. They're also land managers, but we're looking at how do those communities become involved, both in a decision making, but also in a skills development and just a wider engagement and knowledge, as well as celebrating the fact that the land is a story. The land has been part of the community for a long time, and it's part of everyone's sort of DNA. So how do we take that forward into the future as well? So it's a completely different model. Neither are better or worse. They're just very different. So this is sort of a graphic of what we mean by what we're doing. So it's different projects, different areas. They all ultimately are stepping stones to join things together, to join habitats together, to join designated sites together, but also maybe just to address smaller elements of those drivers for biodiversity loss. It's maybe not doing everything. It's maybe looking at herbivore pressure in one area or invasives in another area. It's not doing a whole holistic thing. It completely is from the bottom up. We're at the very early stages of delivery for this. We're in year 1, as opposed to Great Trossachs Forest is in year 20. So we've got a long way to go, but we're starting on that journey. And I think it's important to start somewhere, and we're starting with a huge sort of we were successful with some funding from Nature Scott, and that is giving us a huge impetus to start with gusto, basically. But the thing that's different as well is the livelihoods element of it. We're not saying this whole area is going to be turned over to conservation. This is looking at how that jigsaw of landowners can fit in with the land uses that are required for economic stability, but also to recognise the heritage of the area, and the heritage of the area is innately linked to the hills and to the area, basically. That underpins the local economy, and that underpins the ability for that local community to thrive. At the moment, there's the same issues happening in all rural areas: loss of opportunity, loss of affordable housing, loss of young people. You know, that negative feedback loop, somehow there needs to be some intervention. So providing opportunities, providing skills, providing a link to the area. Hopefully, affordable housing is the one bit we are not able to tackle through this project, but it is looking at, well, where are the drivers to try and keep a community infrastructure going, and how can nature restoration help that process, basically. So that's what we are sort of heavily focusing on from Wild Strathfillan. So it's a completely different landscape approach, and it's quite interesting to see how those two are sort of working together, and how we can have opportunities of learning for both of those landscapes. I just thought I'd reiterate the people element of it and how important the people element is. This is the vision for Wild Strathfillan. People are in there. People are part of it, basically. We can't do it without them. And that's people in whether they're residents, whether they're land managers, whether they're the younger part of the community, whether they're the older part of the community, whether they're visitors. It's all elements of that, and it's recognizing where we all have had an impact and where we all can have an impact. And the other element of that is, you may have heard of a thing called green finance. It's a very ethereal and complicated, I don't even know how to describe it. It's basically looking at how we can derive revenue from either the sale of carbon, the sale through woodlands, or the sale of carbon through peatlands at the moment, but it could also be through the sale of biodiversity. In England, that is now a legal requirement through biodiversity net gain. It's not a legal requirement in Scotland at the moment, but there are plans looking at how that could be introduced. We had a funded project where we looked at, well, that's okay, but how does the community benefit as part of that finance initiative? So if communities don't benefit, then there's nobody there to care for the land. There's nobody there to manage the land. There's nobody there to monitor. There's nobody there to make sure biodiversity increases going forward. So we've done a lot of work doing some preparation to say, well, what would community benefit look like, and how could that be integrated into a wider green finance model? There's lots of other work going on across Scotland looking at this at the moment. It's an emerging area, but at the moment untested. So we are still trying to work through that with our colleagues and as part of a bigger community of practice and shared learning. But again, it's a really interesting angle for where people can become involved in conservation. I could talk forever about that as well, but I won't. And then I've mentioned people a lot in relation to biodiversity. Another huge area of work where we deliver is, I'm calling it nature literacy, but it's basically getting people engaged in the outside. Our strapline and how we work is creating connections in nature, creating connections with nature and to each other. Creating connections with nature is nature literacy. And I think I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about it, because I think it's really important at an individual level how we move through a journey of connection. And that journey is where we as a people have lost a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. And if we're going to try and address the biodiversity crisis, we need people to move through this journey, to have more passion, to have more knowledge, and also to be more engaged in the whole process. So this is just my brain dump for how we work or within our charity. As a charity, we've decided to focus more on biodiversity, the biodiversity crisis, rather than the carbon crisis, because we feel we have more skills and more impact in relation to that. So these are the steps that we are taking as an organisation and as a charity to try and encourage and address the biodiversity crisis. So the first thing is start talking about being outside. We don't have to use the word biodiversity. You don't have to use the word conservation. It's being outdoors. It's actually having the opportunity to go outdoors. And the first bit is to start thinking about it. Now, I was down with my best friend, for example, last weekend, and her son didn't go outside the whole day or the whole weekend because he was doing his homework. He was doing what teenagers do, is playing on his Xbox. He was watching the football. But to have it in your psyche to think, I need to go outdoors or I want to go outdoors, is a really important first step. And it's a step we often forget about, that we're in concrete boxes all the time. We need to get ourselves outside. So that promotion to say, let's get out, let's go and have a look, let's go for a walk, let's go and just stand outside and get some fresh air. And so what we do is we create opportunities for that. We hold regular events. We do a health walk program. We do opportunities for cycling. We do opportunities for adaptive cycling as well, and working with some of our stakeholders for that. We just look at creating those possibilities for people to get outside. And then when they are outside, it's looking around you. It's simple. It's sort of saying, oh, look at that lovely purple flower growing out of that wall. It's actually opening people's eyes to things like that. It's very basic, but it is a very important first step for the wider consensus to do. We then sort of look through engaging, being mindful, being social, having fun, basically enjoying being in whatever that surrounding is, whatever you're doing, whether you're being active, whether you're sitting, whether you're walking, whatever you're doing, swimming, whatever it is. It's maybe thinking about, well, oh, that is a pretty purple flower. I'm going to take a photo of it. I'm going to listen to the bees. I'm going to listen to the bird song. I'm going to just enjoy, instead of going to a cafe to see my friend, we'll go for a walk. The next level is then going, oh, well, why is that purple flower there? Or what is all of that? And it's starting to reflect about what you're seeing. And it's a deeper level of observation. There's a lot of research coming through about, it's called the 5 ways to wellbeing. It's actually now 6 ways to wellbeing. The being outside and going through those processes of wellbeing are really important for our own personal self, but also to benefit the wider, we have to go through this to help benefit nature as well as ourselves. Next level is actually more engaged, more spending more time. Basically, you're discovering, you're learning, you're going to new places, you're finding out about things. Even all the experts I've been out with over the years, they're very interested in their subject, whether they're birders or whatever, but they maybe know nothing about lichens or mosses or something like that. There's always stuff for us to learn, and nature is a great place. The outdoors is a great place to do that. And then you get into the full-on participation. That's your volunteering. That's your campaigning to protect an area. It's learning why an area is special, and then proactively trying to say, well, what's missing? How can we help? What can we do? And then we talk about it. Exactly what I'm doing now, talking about why things are important, why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's a really interesting journey. So we're trying to work to move people through that journey. It doesn't matter they start at 0. If they get to 1, that's fab. That's a good start, isn't it? And then move on and move on. So I just thought I'd end by a few little photos of examples of some of the things we do, just to show that it's not all about planting trees or looking at a certain flower or something. It can be quite broad. So from a promotion point of view, we've done a lot to look at the local businesses in the area that are going that extra mile, to say to people to get outdoors. We support you. We don't mind your muddy boots coming in. We don't mind. We've got bike parking. We've got all of these things. That opportunity to then to think about coming out is through that promotion. So we have all of these businesses that we've been promoting to say, these businesses want you to come and see them through it in the outdoors. You don't have to get in your car. You can cycle, you can walk. They will love to see you in all of your mud and all of your rain gear. It's fantastic. And we also then have our health walk program, which we run weekly within 6 different locations. And we go to different locations as well, so that that routine of being out every week, we have some walkers that have been with us over 10 years and they've hardly missed a session. They are out and about, and we do, some people would prefer a safe, supported setting to get out, and we provide that. It's free. We never charge for any of our activities. And we also do special training days, or we'll do themed walks where we go and learn about something, or we have that opportunity then to become a bit more curious. So we give the opportunity and then we start building on it. We also support some wider groups coming into the national park. So this is Bonnie Boots, to provide wider opportunities to say, yeah, we will provide that supported walking session for you as well. So you get the opportunity to engage with nature. So it's not all just about our local communities we work with communities of interest too. And we have a program called In Step with Nature, which is that next stage. So we've got that opportunity to be outside. Let's start looking at what's outside. We don't need to know what it is, but we just can say, wow, that's really nice, or that's really pretty. Oh, look, that frog at the bottom right was a team day. We just happened to notice it was on our path, and we all just said, oh, look, I mean, probably wasn't happy looking at us or walked past it, but it was there. So I think it's starting to look at things and then engage. So we asked our In Step with Nature people to say, we do a fortnightly challenge where we say, today's challenge, go out and see if you can find fungi, or this week's challenge is to look for the primrose. Its first primrose is the start of spring. And the challenge in this photo, we said, we're trying to record the colours of the rainbow. And we were inundated with fantastic photos of people just finding the colours of the rainbow. And that opportunity to engage is just showing that, noticing what is special about your surroundings. And we've had so much feedback from people through In Step with Nature to say, I never really noticed what was on my doorstep, and now I want to learn a little bit more. And that's really exciting. And then you need to provide that opportunity for learning a little bit more. So we do a lot of work as part of Wild Strathfillan. We're doing work with schools, and we're doing work with just sort of discovery days to say, well, come and find out what is on your doorstep, and come and find out a little bit more. We'll have an expert to answer your questions, and/or we'll do some activities. You know, in the case on the right, we were collecting rowan berries for our tree nursery. And then get dirty, get your hands dirty if you want to, learn about stuff. This is a tree nursery that we're working with at Glenfalloch, and this is the Community Development Trust. They have a community garden as well at Strathfillan. So we went out and we collect seeds, we grow them on, we repot things. There's opportunities to do a little bit more. So we're working down through that journey, basically from that, oh, I maybe should think about going outside, to this is, look at what I've done, look at what I've planted, look at what I've collected. And that engagement all the way through to that, the ability to be involved, is how we are trying to address the biodiversity crisis, by saying at each level we'll support you, but we'll also provide an opportunity to move on to that next level. And that, I think, is the most critical part of our work in relation to the biodiversity, wider biodiversity, but just nature restoration in general, is that level of engagement, no matter what level it is critical, because we need to support everybody to re-engage, basically. That, hopefully, I've not gone over too much time, and I didn't break up in terms of my network, but that was all I was going to share with you today. So hopefully that was useful. So I shall just stop sharing, then I can see the screen again.
Thank you, Sue. That was amazing. It was really helpful thank you for cramming in so much about what you do. It was great to.
Sorry, I talk fast as well. Sorry.
No, I mean, it would be wonderful to have the slides as well. I think there are some really interesting infographics that would be great to look back on. Um, and also, I think you gave a really clear, avenue for people to get involved with yourself, the clear campaigns and activities that you're doing as well on that level too. So really helpful. And any questions that you might have for Sue, pop them in the chat and we'll hopefully revisit later.
Just to
So
say, yeah, I'm happy to share the slides. I might take off the Nature Scott one because I
yeah.
did steal it, and I don't want to get into trouble. So
No problem. Whatever editing you need to do, totally fine. So next I was going to move on to another wonderful organization, On the Verge. And I wasn't sure who was going to speak first, but we've got Leigh and Frank with us today. So yeah, if you were wanting to share your screen and take us into the next talk, that would be wonderful. Yeah, there, it's always the stress after the practice run.
Okay, is that visible?
I think there's maybe a step to make it into presentation mode. Slideshow? Yeah,
Okay,
perfect.
perfect. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. So we're On the Verge. We're a community organisation covering Stirling and Clackmannanshire. Founded in 2010, our activities have evolved over the last 15 years, and Leigh's section is going to take you through what that evolution was and how we changed the way we approach things, what we do. But essentially, been working to create wildflower-rich patches or habitats, establishing a network of nectar-rich feeding stations for bees and other pollinators across Stirling and Clackmannanshire. Again, very much driven by some of the things that Sue was mentioning, the biodiversity crisis, the impact of that, and what we have to do. And again, as is happening in Strathdyllan, we focus on one thing and said this is one area where we can have an impact. We work with community groups, schools, churches, sports clubs, youth groups, anyone who's got a bit of land who can work with us. And what we're trying to do is empower communities to change through the action that they can take. Benefit from support from key partners such as Clackmannanshire and Stirling Environment Trust, who provide literally seed money, which is really, really important to us. And also we get great support from the Stirling Council and Clackmannanshire Council criminal justice teams with unpaid work teams who repay their debt to society by coming up and helping restore nature, which is a lovely thing to do. So they'll do the rotivation and deturfing so that we can then sow the sites with school children. The impact of our work, I'm sorry, that's Leigh will explain why we're called On the Verge, but that's Gartness Road looking on the West Highland Way, looking across towards Loch Lomond. That's one of our few On the Verge sites that is a roadside verge that's been readapted as a pollinator patch. In general, sometimes main road verges aren't that good because of the pollution, because of the wind disruption caused by trucks going past and so on. But that's a nice quiet road. It's a lovely showcase road because it is on the West Highland Way, and we're very happy to have that. If we look at our work in terms of numbers of bees and hoverflies and other pollinators who increase as a result, we've got sort of scientific proof, but we're equally keen to understand our impact on the landscape, what we do, how we do it, how we can improve what we do. So we've evolved and we're changing the way we do things, also trying to work with both councils as partners as they respond and change to make sure that we're helping them and working with them. Interestingly, our seed mix is from Scotia Seeds, who are a Scottish supplier, so they are native plants that are native bred, as it were. The mix we have is primarily perennials, but there are some annuals in too, because they give you that initial first year kick in before the perennials take over. So the picture on the left hand side shows a patch that's extended over time. The bits to the extreme left are the perennials that have taken over. The bits in this on the right hand side of that picture are the annuals that have come through that first year. So particularly when you're working with schools, that initial burst of colour that the annuals can provide gives them a real sort of feel good factor and feel that they've achieved something. That's another shot of the Verge on the West Highland Way. But in terms of how we've changed and adapted, I'll hand you over to Leigh. She'll take you through what was the trigger for her and as our founder of the organisation, and what changes we've been making as we've learned how to do things slightly differently.
Okay, thanks very much, Frank. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to tell you a little bit about how On the Verge got started and how we've changed what we do over the years. We've always tried to respond to emerging research, mainly because we didn't have the knowledge ourselves. We're kind of enthusiastic amateurs. So the information that's come out from scientific studies has been hugely useful. And in fact, it was emerging research that sparked the idea in the first place back in 2010. I was in my kitchen, I was making packed lunches like you do, listening to the radio. And Dave Goulston was being interviewed from Stirling University. He's one of our experts in bumblebees. And he was talking about his research. He set up the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. He was talking about his research and why pollinator populations were in decline and, why they were under pressure. And there wasn't huge consensus about exactly what was going on. But one thing all the experts did agree on was that a diminishing amount of wildflowers out in the wider countryside was having a very negative impact. And a lot of the research was showing that pollinators were sort of drifting into towns and cities in search of pollen and nectar because our gardens offer them a lot more. And I thought, if bumblebees are clever enough to adapt their behavior that quickly to changing circumstances, wouldn't it be great if we could be clever enough to adapt our behaviors to help them? And then Dave said a very key phrase. He said some species of bumblebee had already gone extinct and others were on the verge of extinction. And I thought, oh, On the Verge, that would make a great title for a bee project. Somebody should definitely do that. And well, here we are. So beware a good idea whilst making packed lunches. Initially, we kind of ran with the whole idea of urban environments. And now we've broadened that out and we'll go anywhere, as Frank says. But initially, we thought we'd target schools because that would give us a good geographic spread through towns, maybe a bit of connectivity in terms of sites. And we'd go into schools and we would dig out some existing vegetation. You can see there, that's us working with Newton Primary about 10 years ago. And you can see that the criminal justice teams have dug out a strip and rotivated it over for us. And we go in with the kids and sow up the seed. And we still do that to this day, although we have changed our approach in other circumstances. And we still do it in schools for two reasons. One, that's short managed turf that's probably not going to do anything. It's just going to be cut anyway. So we're not taking out anything of value. And two, it's a really great way for the kids to engage very quickly with what we're doing. I mean, they're literally getting their hands dirty. So they're taking ownership of the space. They're sowing in the seed, they're watching the flowers grow. Hopefully when they come back after the summer holidays, they see the flowers, they understand. They might collect the seed at the end of the season to sow back in, so they understand about the life cycle of plants. So it's a very quick way to get that engagement. However, we have kind of changed our approach in other circumstances. And largely as a result of some information we got from a fantastic conference held by Nature Scott in 2019. And some of us went along and we heard a talk by a very inspiring man called Dr. Phil Sterling, who was working for Butterfly Conservation at the time. And he had worked for Dorset Council and he was an ecologist by background. And he'd been doing some great work in Dorset, managing the land to encourage wildflowers to support pollinators wherever possible. And he was doing this by using the principle of cut and collect, which I hadn't heard about at the time. I mean, you might know about this. I didn't at the time, and it was a bit of a revelation. And the principle is that normally when local authorities cut grass, they leave the clippings on site. The clippings rot down. They put lots of fertility into the soil, particularly nitrogen, which grass loves. So the grass is very happy. It grows back vigorous and strong, and it outcompetes everything else. So the wildflowers don't get a look in. which is why wildflowers don't like high fertility, I think, because it's the grass that gets in the way. But if you collect the arisings, the clippings, take them off site, and you do that over a number of seasons, it gradually weakens the grass and other things can get a look in. And if you combine that with yellow rattle, which is a fantastic native annual wildflower, it's a yellow plant. It's not very beautiful, but it's very hardworking and it parasitizes the roots of some grasses. And it's fantastic when you see it take an action on grassland because it's very easy to collect. It's very easy to sow in. You need to sow it in the autumn. It needs a period of cold to break its dormancy. And then once it takes hold, as long as the grass is there to support it, it just goes right through an area of grassland and significantly suppresses the grass. I've never seen it fail. Tempting fate. It's fantastic. So this combination of yellow rattle, cut and collect is a very natural way to manage grassland to encourage wildflowers to support pollinators. So this was fantastic. We thought this was great information. We had no idea what to do with it. The next sort of pivotal moment came in 2020, as it did for many of us with the pandemic, lockdown, work stopped, lots of walking through Stirling, areas I know really well. And if you remember that lovely spring, early summer, I saw wildflowers along the verges that I'd never seen before. And of course, I realized I'd never seen them because they've been cut out every year relentlessly. And it just was like a eureka moment, really, a bit slow in the uptake probably. But so I thought, this is crazy. Why are we going in and digging up turf, sowing in new seed when this resource is just sitting there waiting to be allowed to happen? We've got to change what we do. And so decided to lobby the local council to get them to take a more ecological approach to the way they manage their grassland. We got a petition up. We spoke to anybody we could do. We got all the councillors on side, politicians. We presented the petition to council and with a presentation, and they agreed in principle to adopt the principles behind what we were asking for, to be more ecological in approach to grass management, to adopt cut and collect, and to support pollinator populations. So I thought, fantastic, that's brilliant. Job done, which was very naive because I literally expected it to start happening the next day. Well, of course, it didn't. It then took about 3.5 years for it to be adopted as policy in the form of a pollinator strategy. And we now have a pollinator working group. And we are keeping on going. It's very slow progress. What I did learn is that there's 3 different types of time in this country. There's British summer time, there's Greenwich Mean Time, and there's local authority time. And if you want to live a very long life, adopt local authority time, because it'll certainly feel like you've lived a long time, because everything takes ages. But we are getting there. And of course, there are other constraints that have been thrown into the mix, not least the financial constraints that councils are under just now. But actually, that has afforded us another opportunity. And I don't know if many of you have noticed in your local parks or green spaces that grass cutting is not happening as much as it once was, and larger areas are being left uncut. It's not necessarily always very popular with residents, and it doesn't necessarily achieve what we want it to achieve, just not cutting grass. But with a very small amount of management, it can make a huge difference. So about 4 years ago, this is a slide of our lovely colleagues at Newton, residents at Newton in Dunblane, next to the park. They approached us about 4 years ago and said, look, there's lots of areas of this park not being cut now, but we want to kind of manage it a little. So we asked the council to adopt it as a pollinator site. We got them to agree to do a cut and collect at the end of every season, just before the grass cutting stopped in October. They did that for us. Then we went in the first year and we sowed in yellow rattle seed. Now, the management that we're doing here is 2 hours once a year at the end of the season. That's all it takes, with maybe 10, 15 people, and it can achieve a huge amount. It's great exercise and it's a fantastic thing to do. It doesn't take a lot of commitment. We sowed in the yellow rattle seed. Next summer, woof, it really took off. It was absolutely fantastic, did its job. The following year, we sowed in some donor sites, because sometimes if you, in the middle of an area like this, which we're trying to manage for wildflowers, once the yellow rattle's had its action, if you dig up a little bit, a little spit, there's a circle there in the middle that you can see, That's one of the donor sites. You dig out the turf there, sow in some of our mix, which is 100% wildflowers. You get a little sort of quite dense amount of flowers in the middle of, that's an example of one of our donor sites at Beechwood. And that gradually follows the yellow rattle out, all being well, and spreads throughout the site. So it's another way to get a greater sort of floral diversity in there. So there's lots of things you can do. Last year we sowed in some wildflower plugs. I'm hoping this year we'll get some good results. The yellow rattle does dominate for a while. As long as the grass is there, it can dominate for a good few years, a bit of a monoculture, but it's obviously offering nectar and pollen. When that dies away, other stuff comes through. So we've got a number of community meadows now. We've got one at university with the students and the grounds people there. We've got another one in Dunblane. We've got one at Maitland Park, McLaren Terrace in Stirling, and one at the Mayfield Library. But we're always looking for more sites and more people to get involved. So if you know somewhere near you that could benefit from this type of management, which is basically free because we'll supply the seed, it's just a bit of hard labor for 2 hours once a year, then get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And post-pandemic, Frank came on board to help out. Frank and I know each other from a long time ago at university. Frank worked for many years for Glasgow City Council, so he's got a wealth of local authority experience, which has been invaluable. And he's doing some great stuff out in his patch of the woods out in West Stirlingshire. So I'm going to hand him back to him, and he'll tell us a bit about what he's doing where he lives, if we've still got time, Frank.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll race through this. So I mean, we're all here today because we believe in climate change, are concerned about damage to the environment, but also because we believe we can make a difference, whether it's taking action in adaptation or mitigation, or actually helping to protect or restore our environment. And as Sue was saying, taking that action actually makes us feel better. At times, trying to take that action can be a lonely thing, and that's why events like these FEL learning lunchtimes are really good, because they bring people together and they help you understand you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there, there's a lot of us working together, and we're doing something worthwhile. It's also because it gives you agency. I mean, working with schools, particularly primary schools, and creating pollinator patches, while the impact in terms of square meters isn't necessarily that great, it's a chance for young people to get involved and take action. It's a chance for young people who have climate anxiety to turn that into climate agency, to take away the anger at habitat destruction and give them an action that they can feel a part of and an engagement with. So we're keen to work with the learning communities and work with the different schools in Stirling and in Clackmannanshire. As Leigh mentioned, I live in Killearn. The learning community there is based around Balfron High. So in the 3 or 4 years I've been working with On the Verge, we've done Balfron High, Balfron primary schools in Strathblane, Drimmen, Gargunnock, Gartmore, Portamonteith, and Killearn itself. We're hoping this year to do Fintry and Kippen, so that will spread across. It's partly to establish that corridor of network of things, but also because people talk to people at village events find out what other villages are doing, teachers within that learning community speak to each other. So we'd love to see that pocket approach work across other parts of Stirling and Clacks. There's another 6 high schools in Stirling, there's 3 high schools in Clacks. It would be great if each learning community could take it on, and we'd be happy to work with and support someone who wants to be the kind of key link person in their patch with the support they need to try and make that a reality and move it forward. So, you know, if you want to first of all, I'll have more photos to add to our gallery of wildflowers. But if you know a site for a pollinator patch or community meadow, get in touch with us. You could be the link person in your area. Our website's on there, inquiries on there, or you can always find us through FEL. But we'd love to we've got a formula that works. We'd love to spread it out and extend it further. And we'll stop now. So I'm sure there's questions for both us and for Sue. And we've got 10 minutes left. Perfect timing. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. That was really good timing. And yeah, I think both really complimentary presentations today. It's really fantastic to hear your journey with On the Verge and all those fantastic opportunities that you have as well immediately for folks to get involved with. I've got an immediate sort of wee question for you, if you would be able to come to Falkirk or extend any of that reach to Falkirk.
So we were talking about this yesterday, weren't we, Frank? we're a very small group. There's only about 7 or 8 of us. So it's a bit difficult for us to stretch ourselves too far. So we sort of focus on Clacks and Stirling. But if there was somebody in Falkirk that wanted to kind of get going out there, we'd be really happy to. We actually have an On the Verge Cambridge, a sister organisation down there. So if anybody felt like setting up an On the Verge Falkirk, even if it's just one little spot in one little park, it's a start. Please get in touch, and we're really happy to kind of help support all of that. Whether or not we can actually come over and deliver on is a bit of a stretch for us, but get in touch anyway, and we'll talk.
Yeah, and it could be something FEL could support as well with our teams and make that connection. As you say, the learning is here with you guys and all of that, so there's potential for it to be replicated in some way. I also had a wee question for from the Eventbrite. I think I read out to you ahead. So someone's asked if there's anything that can be done by public, for examples in the back gardens to support urban bee populations, and just any advice for toolkits on how to implement this and what types of plants and seeds at what time of year, that kind of information that you could share.
Frank, do you want to, or
Yeah,
should I?
okay, so there is a sort of how-to guide on our website that will take people through things that they can do. I think one of the key things is to try and have the confidence to let your garden be a little bit messy. So it's really sad to see at this time of year people thinking, right, go into the garden, rip out all the old vegetation, totally clear it, have this immaculate sterile thing. Because if it's sterile, there's nothing going to grow there. There's no insects. You've taken all the insects that were potentially sitting as eggs and waiting to hatch and got rid of them from your garden. It's all the things that would do you good have gone. So let your garden be a bit messier. Make sure there's, if you can afford it, have a patch to the garden that's dead wood or leaf piles, so that there's a natural habitat, not just for pollinators, but for all the wonderful things that go to make up our biodiversity. And then the website will have information online about the sorts of perennials that you can plant that are good for pollinators, that give a range of nectar with this, hopefully as extended a season as possible, so that you're helping. But even things like not cutting clover and daisy, people who see clover and daisy in their lawns and then treat it. First of all, lawns aren't the friendliest things, but if you've got clover and daisy, well, that's good for pollinators. It's good for insect life. Don't feel you've got to eradicate it. Do let it grow. Take part in No Mow May, and we've got some people out here who go through No Mow May and then thought about it and said, do you know what? Let's leave it. So it's now No Mow May, June, July, and August. They just let it run throughout the summer, and they're being rewarded by some wonderful wildflowers that are coming through.
And don't forget, pollinators need water as well. I think we tend to forget that. So a little dish of water somewhere, especially if it's very hot, dry weather. Don't forget about that.
Thank you. That's really helpful response. Does anyone have any questions that are here today? Wanted to ask anything from our speakers? I was quite interested, Sue. I'm sorry if I missed this in your presentation, but within Wild Strathfillan, just wondering if you had any details about the types of things that you're trying to preserve up there in terms of biodiversity, like the creatures and the plant life and things that are unique to there.
Yeah, lots is the short answer. Wild Strathfillan's part of this area called the Bredalbyn Important Plant Area. So that means there's a lot of important plants, but a lot of them are montane species. So that's sort of above the tree line, not quite at the hilltop. They're the sort of small shrubby species. So we're doing a lot of work in relation to how grazing levels are the main, so herbivores in particular, but sheep and deer specifically from the herbivores, how those numbers can be controlled, how grazing can be adapted. So we've got some stuff with like collars and things that are looking at how do we move grazing around so you pulse it, so therefore that montane species can thrive when it needs to thrive, but it does provide food source for everything else as well. So we're looking at that. There's some herbaceous species there's like twin flower and globe flower that are quite rare locally that we're looking at trying to bring to bring back from the Verge, but it's more the fact that everything we have is very fragmented. So it's hanging on to crags, it's hanging on to cliff edges, and that diversity, both in terms of genetic diversity, but diversity in terms of what's needed in that landscape, needs to spread out. So we're not necessarily going to go, well, we're going to focus on globeflower or we're going to focus on this. We're saying, let's look at that whole area and go, how can we put the conditions in place for everything to come back, that will be in the ground, or it will float in, or it will be pooed in, basically. We just need to make sure the conditions are right for when that does happen, those habitats can thrive. So we don't focus on a specific species, we're focusing on how we can make those habitats ready for that return. We will be doing tree planting and things, but that is more of a post area to provide seed source for the habitat of woodland to return, to enable those wider species that need to come in, whether that's the species are plants or whether those species are animals.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I know we're getting quite close to time, so happy to wrap that up there if no one else had any other pressing questions. But just offering a really huge thanks to all of you for presenting today. It was really, really interesting and very informative, and lots of nice comments in the comments section as well there. So I very much appreciate your time, and also hope everyone did get to enjoy some lunch and listen in. And yes, please keep an eye out for our next one, which will be around retrofitting. So again, I didn't mention before, but these topics are super broad, but we hope to, repeat this over time and really get into some of the more, niche items within these broad adaptation topics. So huge thanks to everyone. Please do keep an eye on the link there for our upcoming event next week, and some current job opportunities around energy, a community energy program that we'd love help sharing. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.